And here we go. Well, technology, you better be nice to us because we really need you to be nice to us. I am going live after many centuries. So I would love for people to be able to watch it. Well, so we are going to talk today about flourishing introverts. And I am going to be grilling Joanna, or maybe she'll grill me. We don't know.
Grilling.
What do you think, Joanna, would happen?
I'm not sure I like
Well,
the
you
sound of
never know.
grilling.
At least I could. Well, at least I'm scaring you, and that's what we're going to talk about, the bullying. So we'll talk about that
Yeah.
as well. Don't don't wait.
Yeah.
So let's begin. And guys, if you're joining for the first time, this is Unleashed Leaders of Change, Season 7, the premiere episode with Joanna Rawbone. And I'm actually going live after nearly a year or so. So this is big. And this is Season 7. And yeah, there's another story about that. So we'll talk about that in another century. For now, we're just going to get to know Joanna. And if you're an introvert, you should tune in. If you're an extrovert, you should tune in. If you're an extrovert who has a bias against introverts, you must tune in. And if you don't, okay, you're lost, not mine. So, and we're going to start in a second. All right. Now there's dead air. Okay, fine. Should I count down with people? 12, 10? I should make a smaller, shorter countdown. Yeah, okay. So yes, introverts can talk a lot sometimes. Speaking of which, are you an introvert? Or do you know somebody who's an introvert? I mean, here's something that I realized and learned since I got to know Joanna. Half the world is introvert, or, well, no, there's no or. Half the world is introvert. And we have lots of bias, lots of discrimination, preconceived notions, and you name it. Some of the things that we are very reserved, or we are, cunning. We have something going on in our mind, and we have plans. We're scheming against the world. I don't know. I say we because it looks like I'm an extrovert, but I'm not. And I questioned that myself for quite a while because I do talk. I do talk a lot. Then I realized approximately 10 years ago, I only do talk a lot when I'm really passionate about something. I'm in the right company. But as soon as I am done, there's a certain battery, which we'll talk about. As soon as the battery starts going at 3%, I don't want to talk to anybody in this world. And that could be for next 3, 4, 6 hours, 2 days. The biggest thing that I know is if you don't contact me for 200 days, I'll be happy. I have no problems not being in the company as long as I have my dogs and cats around me. So talking about introverts, can introverts really flourish? Well, that's the question we're asking Joanna Rawbone today. So welcome to the show, Joanna. How are you going?
I'm doing really well, thank you. And I was having a little chuckle there as I was listening to you, thinking about, the extent to which we can chat as introverts.
And I think that's a big, we're going to jump into myths and all that, but I don't want to jump before the topic. But this is it. There's so much. People have a little template for us that's what an introvert looks like. And that's not true. You and I are different, very different. We couldn't be more different, yet we have so many similarities. So it just depends, right? But before we go into that, let's tell people who we are, what we do. So Joanna, if you don't mind giving a little introduction into Joanna, the person, and did you choose to be an introvert?
Did I choose to be an introvert? Absolutely not. And I didn't find out that what made me different was being an introvert until I was in my 30s. I always knew I was different. I would take myself to bed early to read as a child because I could escape into my own little world. And it wasn't until, as I say, my 30s when I was on a women's leadership program and we first did the Myers-Briggs type indicator that I found out I was an introvert. Now, I know a lot of people dismiss Myers-Briggs, but for many introverts like me, the first time we read that little paragraph that describes who we are and how we operate is the first moment I got a sense of, so I'm okay then. I'm not broken. I don't need fixing. There are other people like me, and I can't tell you what an amazing moment that was for me. And yet
yeah,
that didn't necessarily, that wasn't the start of a good journey for me. And I'll talk maybe more about that later.
well, that's what I'm sort of getting at, because when we actually realize the first impression, because of the life experiences we have, is, am I broken? Do I need to fix myself? Do I need to change myself? Even
Yeah.
after realizing that all I is an introvert, the social bias, actually still first thing that I was convinced about is, oh, that's a problem.
It is.
Realizing who I am wasn't a good thing. It was like an attack on myself, because it's like, that's a problem. I need to fix this. I need to
Yeah.
find a solution. So, and we'll get into that. But before that, Joanna, before doing what you do now, which we'll get into,
Mm-hmm.
you have actually been in corporate world where it is all about extroversion. It is all about communication, being present, showing up. How did you cope with that?
Interestingly, I coped surprisingly well. So my background is that I worked for British Telecom, obviously the biggest at the time telecoms provider here in the UK. And I chose to move into an engineering role fairly quickly, at a time when women didn't do that kind of thing. And it was one of the things that kind of unleashed in me, in a way, my first bit of confidence. And what I now know is that that confidence was not authentic necessarily, because what I was doing was I was acting up, if you like. I was trying to be more extroverted in order to fit in and get on, because that's how everyone else seemed to operate. So I wore a cloak and a mask for quite a long time, and really suppressed who I really was. And I became this, I don't want to use the word fake, but the reality is that probably for about 3 decades, I wasn't the real me. And it took its toll eventually.
Well,
Because the work
it's go on.
the work I did, I loved, both as in an engineering role, and then I moved into the world of training. I took on my first training role when BT launched Total Quality Management. And so for me, that was kind of nicely aligned with the engineering piece, because it was all about quality improvement. And I could stand in front of a room and deliver training, and I found my passion for doing that. So again, it kind of dispelled a myth in a way about introverts not being able to be confident, be in front of people, be on stage, be trainers, be whatever we were, because actually I could do it and I loved it, and I still love it. So here am I, nearly 35, almost 40 years later, still doing the work I love, training and coaching and facilitating individuals, groups and teams.
And that's what it is. If we get the right environment, if we get the right choices we can make, and the right career we can choose, we can flourish, which we'll talk about. I'm so tempted to talk about your brand right now, but I'm going to have to hold myself, because first I want to talk about the extroversion bias.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that, and specifically for me, how does it actually play a role in discrimination?
And it's such an important question to ask. So thank you for starting with that. And in fact, I was talking to somebody just yesterday, and they say, oh, I do a lot of work in the area of diversity, and she said equality. And it's like, gosh, that's so last century to talk about it as diversity and equality. She said, and I'd never heard of the extroversion bias. I had to go away and look it up. And that shocked me, because actually anybody who's immersed in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion should, or if they're not already aware, should become aware of the extroversion bias, because it's those everyday practices in education, in society, in the workplace that discriminate against introverts, because all of it is geared up towards the extrovert ideal. So the fact that we give quieter people feedback that they need to push themselves forward, they need to speak up more. So it's not about be yourself. You're a great version of yourself. Carry on being yourself. It's be more like those people. Be more like those who are extroverted. Speak up more. Push yourself forward more. Don't hold back. And
Absolutely.
it hides in plain sight in organizations, in families as well, but in education, pretty much everywhere in society.
Absolutely. And the thing that I hear the most is at every point, people are trying to tell us, well, you can change and you can succeed if you speak more, if you show up more, if you raise your hands more.
Yeah.
The biggest setback or the biggest negative that I see is nobody is interested in listening to the one voice I have, that I am an introvert.
Yeah.
That is the one thing that I want to talk about and tell you, but nobody's listening to that. Instead, they're telling us, this is how I can fix myself. And when you constantly grow up in work, at work, at home, in your streets, everywhere, in sports, you feel like something is wrong with you. You feel like you need to fix yourself. I hate to use the term, but you feel like a loser. You feel like there's no point.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's certainly one of the things I experienced, and hence my phrase now. And I know it's a phrase you love, Szebastian, which is, I'm not weird, I'm wired differently, because the functional neuroimaging studies show that the brains of introverts and extroverts light up differently when stimulated in the same way. So this is part of neurodiversity as part of the DEI agenda. This is not something that's, something that's an inconvenience. It's actually, for anybody who's serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is an integral part of it.
And you're so right. I actually use that a lot now. I'm not weird, I'm differently wired, because you know what? A simple statement like that gave me so much more power, gave me so much more. Every time somebody tried to, intentionally or unintentionally, if they tried to make me feel like there's something wrong with me, or I'm weird, I instantly had something back to say. I'm not weird. I am differently wired. And if you don't understand, that's something you need to work on, not me.
Yeah.
Which is something I want to talk about. This impacts our mental health as well.
Yes.
Greatly, at work, at home, everywhere. Because again, number one, as an introvert, we don't talk. We don't express ourselves. I'm going to contradict my statement in a second, but we don't talk and express ourselves in the traditional way that people are expecting. So we don't say what's going on, and we internalize it, and that affects our mental health. It's so damaging. Would you mind getting into a bit of, different myths we have around introversion?
Mm-hmm. So there are many myths, and to the point where even if you Google or, do a search in a dictionary for introversion, extroversion, you will still often find negative adjectives and words associated with introverts, and really positive words associated with extroverts and extroversion. So I think for me, the key myths are people think we're antisocial because we don't show up necessarily to all the functions, all the do's, all the parties. In a workplace, we don't necessarily want to go out for, a drink after work or a meal after work with our colleagues. In the playground, when I was a youngster, I didn't want to run around madly with everyone else and kind of shout and scream. I wanted to sit quietly. Why? Well, now I know, because actually I'm not antisocial. I'm selectively social. I can be as sociable as the next person provided I've got enough charge in my mental, my emotional, and my social batteries. And therefore, before things like this, I needed to pre-charge my batteries. And as soon as we're done, and you mentioned this earlier, I'll be off.
Right.
I won't want to talk to anyone. So one of the first myths is that we're antisocial. We're not. We're selectively social. And you and I know, Szebastian, that we can talk for hours, and I promise we won't do that here, but we can talk for hours, because what we're not doing is the small talk, the superficial stuff that doesn't stimulate us. What we love doing is getting into a generative conversation that kind of has my brain going ping, 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 and kind of moves my thinking on. And that's the kind of conversation we really want to get into. But it also there's another myth, which I think many introverts themselves somehow subscribe to. And I'm part of quite a few introvert groups, and I see this a lot, which is that introverts hate people. No, we don't. Misanthropes hate people. And there are going to be some introverts.
Cannot stand human beings.
There are going to be some introverts who are misanthropes, but there are also some, extroverts who are misanthropes. And not all introverts hate people. That's not part of introversion. But because we have to be charged enough to interact, and we want to get into those meaty conversations, then I don't necessarily want to spend my time with even extended family who don't stimulate my thinking in the right way. So I don't hate people at all.
That is the thing. We don't like fluff conversation. We don't like superficial conversation. Yeah. If it doesn't make sense to me, if it doesn't connect with me, I'd rather not be part of it. That's not me choosing to be antisocial. That's me just saying, well, that's not my thing. It's just like, if four friends are hanging out and they're into something, and there's a fifth friend who is not into that activity, they're just going to hang, aside and just maybe watch and just enjoy that. But they're still having fun. They're actually having fun. And that's the part I want to talk about, that introverts could be present with you. They just work in their own way. They could be, you might be playing 10-pin ball and having fun, and they're just watching, but they're still having fun. They're still in your company in their own way. And accepting that is so important. One thing I want to talk about is, you were talking about DEI earlier. Now, is DEI really in the direction where it's supposed to be? I ask that because for me, it's kind of become a cliche and one of those superficial things where everybody's talking and saying, we're all about inclusivity and everything. But as you were saying in the example, they have no idea what they're excluding. They have no idea things that are still not included and are so day-to-day part of human life.
Absolutely. And I think there's in a lot of organizations, sorry, I'm just about to sneeze, and I hope I don't sneeze too loud on the program. In a lot of organizations, it's a tick box.
It's allowed to be a human being.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tick box exercise. So we know, for instance, that we should be paying attention to this. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. And one of the things I notice daily is organizations and businesses recruiting for DEI directors. So, this is a relatively new position for some organizations. And it's almost like, we must have a DEI director. Great, got one, tick. But they don't necessarily look beyond the standard things we might think about in terms of, in terms of ethnicity, gender, age, those sorts of things. And they don't look at the neurodiversity beyond the obvious, like dyslexia, autism, Asperger's. It's like, we've got the big ones, so we're okay now. We've done what we need to do. Not at all.
What I call is, discrimination within inclusion, and that's there. That's very much there. I'm going to take a pause for a little second. I've got a couple of comments that I want to put up and acknowledge the audience. So we have High Tech Mother, who I think is right now at 3 a.m. her time. And she says, good to see
Wow.
you. I'm so excited about this conversation. Thank you for tuning in. And guys, wherever you're tuning in from, please let us know. Tell us any questions you have and tell us what
Yeah.
you think about the conversation so far. And then she also says, I totally agree with that. I'm not antisocial. And that's it. A lot of us introverts are forced to believe that we're antisocial. It's constantly, drilled into us. And I know you don't want to use that term, but it is drilled into us. It is bullied into us to believe that that's what's wrong with you. And we try to fix ourselves. Which is not necessarily the case.
One of the leadership groups I was working with, it was pre-lockdown, so we're going back kind of 3 years, I suppose now. They were talking about at the end of how long had we spent with them? Nearly a year, I think, developing them as a cohort. They were talking about all going out for a big get together at the end of it. And they made a joke about, oh, we'll invite X, I won't name him, we'll invite him. And he'll say yes, but he won't come. He'll make an excuse at the last minute. And it was a big joke about, nobody had at that point thought to think about, well, why does he not show up? And actually, the reason that we get labeled as antisocial is because we've spent all of our energy in the workplace trying to get into flow and do our best work. And so at the end of the day, we are spent. And because extroverts get their energy from social interaction and experiences, when they finish work, or a big program like that, they want to go out and socialize together because that's what recharges them. We're already spent. And it's like, please, no, I don't want to do that. And that's why we get labeled as antisocial, because we choose to look or need to look after our own needs rather than pandering to what the extroverts think we ought to be doing.
And what's the irony there? All of us these days are talking about self-care, but when we talk about this as self-care, it's laughed at. It's not taken seriously. And that's why I question that, is DEI really, looking after things that are supposed to? I'm going to acknowledge Rebecca Bradsby is here from New York City and tuning in. Rebecca, I hope you like the conversation, and let us know if you have any questions. One thing that comes to my mind is, with everything that goes on in how we are perceived and how we operate, the battery charge concept so makes sense to me. But then people misunderstand me to be an extrovert, because as we are here right now, we are having a conversation, but when I'm in a social setting, I am very actively involved. I am very actively visible, and I am conversational. I make sure everybody is attended. I'm greeting everyone, so nobody feels like they left out or I didn't, focus on them. But what they don't realize is, and I was sharing this with you a few weeks ago, on my 30th birthday, 54 people in my birthday party, organized within 3 days, massive party, in a high rise and next to the swimming pool. So it was so social that you couldn't imagine. There was no privacy. You're at a swimming pool. It's all glasses around. So there's absolutely nowhere you could hide. What people didn't realize, and some of those people only found that out recently, I organized the party. I got everybody all hyped up, and I vanished. The party went on for 7 hours. I was in that party for a total of no more than 45 minutes.
Wow.
I was there at the beginning. I was there at the end. I was there when, of course, I had to cut the cake. I was there when they were playing certain games. And of course, they wanted the birthday person to be part of it. But what they didn't realize was I wasn't there at all, because everybody was so busy having fun. And that's what I like doing. I like organizing that. I have that, I don't know if I should say that, I have that extroversion side or capability that I can organize people. You give me a challenge, hey, we need to organize 100 people tomorrow and there's an event, I will make it happen. But the moment I've introduced and the moment I've taken the stage and you've seen me all hyped up and all energetic, 3 minutes later, I'm nowhere to be found. Right?
Exactly.
So that's something I want to talk about from the angle of that gave me a lot of self-doubt in my life. I always question, am I really an introvert? Am I using this term loosely? So how do you see that in, what's your perception on that self-doubt that we struggle with?
So you're absolutely right. And there are many different types of introverts. I have a quiz that can help people understand what type of introvert they are. Some people are the classic introverts, which is like the introverted introvert, almost everything we would imagine an introvert to be. But most of us are extroverted introverts. And in the same way, by the way, there are extroverted extroverts, but there are also introverted extroverts. So we're not all the same in so many different ways, I think. And the whole thing about it is, for me, the telling point is when I've had one of those days and I'm on my knees, what is it I need to feel better? Do I need to retreat and curl up with a book, or stroke the cat, or go for a walk in nature on my own, or, as my husband and I quite often do, sit in companionable silence, which is
Right.
for both of us a real joy? Or do I need to get out there and party, or even just go to a busy mall or somewhere where there's lots of energy? That will give you the basic understanding of, ultimately, are you an introvert or an extrovert? So what drains your batteries? What gives you energy? Some people
And
recently have started talking about the fact, oh, well, I'm an ambivert because I'm a bit of both. Now,
mhm,
I'm a Jungian at heart,
the
and Jung,
trends.
I know, but Jung did talk about ambiverts, but it's been misconstrued and misapplied more recently. So an ambivert is someone who is equally charged. When they've had one of those days, they can either go be quiet, or they can go to any big, noisy, loud group. And the reason people say I'm an ambivert is because actually there are a few people I love spending time with. Yeah. But when you're tired, having spent time, what do? Do you retreat, or do you go and spend more time with them? So introverts can access a lot of those extrovert behaviors. And if you are an extroverted introvert, the behaviors you access won't necessarily drain your batteries as much as some of the others. So I happen to be an open introvert, which you can probably guess because of the amount of talking I'm doing. I'm an open introvert. If you ask me what I'm thinking, I will tell you. If you ask me what I'm feeling, I will probably tell you. So you better mean that question. When people say to me, how are you today? I'm very unlikely to do the very British thing of saying, oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm much more likely to say, do you know what? And thank you for asking, because as you've asked, I've realized that actually I feel a bit knotted inside and I'm curious about what. So I'm going to tell you how I'm feeling.
Right.
And
Because that is our thought process. That is how we process. And we've actually got an opportunity who's interested, somebody is interested
yeah,
with the right question, with the right interest. Now, that's a different thing. They might not be interested and they just go, oh, why did I ask? Right. But I do want to talk about, with all of this, the bias really
yeah,
defines and states that, oh, we are not the right value. We cannot bring
yeah,
value. We cannot add value to business, to families, to relationships. One example I'll say is, I know this personally, where partners have gone, well, why are you not telling me what's going on? What's on your mind? The introvert partner is not hiding anything.
yes,
It's just who they don't have much to say, unless they are romantic. When they do their gestures, you can see the romance. You can see things they're doing. You can see in their action how much they care. But they don't
yeah.
have a habit of, surprising you every day, or, you know,
Well,
having a chat once you come back from work. So
yeah.
let's talk deep into, the value that we don't bring, do we not?
And something I need to say about that, because one of the
Mhm.
things that's not understood is the different communication process that we have as introverts. So it's one of the other things that differentiates the introverts and extroverts typically. Now, this isn't absolutely universal, but it is pretty much there. And that is that introverts have a think, say, think communication process. When you ask me a question, I am going to think about my answer so that the answer I give you is my true and honest representation of what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. Whereas extroverts have a say, think, say communication process. So you ask them a question and they'll give you an answer off the top of their head. And they're not attached to what they've said. They may not even remember what they've said. And so when you try and go back to it 10 minutes later or a day later, whenever it is, they'll say, I didn't say that, because they haven't necessarily thought it through, whereas we do. And it's one of the reasons why, again, people often, the kind of prejudice or the bias they hold against us is things like, we have nothing to add, we have nothing to say, we don't have a point of view on things. We absolutely do, but have you given me space in the conversation to express what it is I need to express?
Well, you know what? I will say right now, the Sue is saying, she's my sister. She's saying, what a powerful conversation. So we do have something to add. We do have the value. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And it's one of the things that lights me up, actually, is when introverts find their voice. It's kind of the most delicious thing, because we don't overuse it. Again, you might not think that from the amount I'm talking at the moment, but we don't overuse it. And it's one of the reasons why, when we do contribute, if we believe it, people will often take us seriously, because we're not talking all the time. We're not wasting airtime. We're the ones who are listening. And if we talk about some of the qualities we have and what the world needs more of, then actually empathic listening is one of the biggest things that this world needs. There are too many people talking and nobody's much is listening. We need more people to listen with a sense of curiosity, not with a sense of judgment about whether what people are saying is right or wrong, but with a sense of curiosity, and therefore how we kind of make sense of that, how we follow up with them, how we actually turn things into action. So more listening, less talking.
Yep. And I was just doing that. I was not letting you talk. But that's I'm going to say this because this is our inside joke, people. The shared brain thing just happened, the collective conscious, because I'm actually doing a live on this next week. So you just talked about that, because I'm actually talking about, are you curious or are you judgmental? And the biggest thing, really, I'm giving away now, guys. So if you don't want to come, that's okay. I'm really talking about really saying, you have made an opinion, a judgment, a statement, but did you actually listen to the person? And why I say that is, often, especially these days, we did not let the person finish their statement. By the time they finished their statement, the meaning changed, but we had already reacted. We have already taken a step. And that's what's happening in the world right now. Everybody, I hate to say this, everybody is an expert, and everybody has got a solution. So I find that amazing. And I just want to take this. Sue said, it's the value we bring when we talk. That's it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great point, Sue. Absolutely. It's the value we bring. And therefore, and I hope there are some extroverts listening and joining, and taking away gold from this. But it's about, how do we create the space in organizations, in educational establishments, in families, to hear those quieter voices? One of the things I did quite early on with this work is help people understand how to parent introverts better.
Right.
And it's a tricky subject. There are so many parenting experts out there, but simple things like, when you pick your child up from school, don't grill them immediately about, what did you eat for lunch? Who did you talk to? What have you studied today? What have you learned today? Because if they're an introverted child, again, a bit like me at the end of my day and you at the end of your party, or between kind of bits of your party, we're exhausted, we're drained, And so the introverted child at the end of school needs quiet time to rebuild those batteries. So don't grill them straight away, and don't think there's something wrong with them if they grunt at you or actually don't give you a sensible answer. Acknowledge the fact that, you know, I'd love to hear about your day. When you're ready to tell me, let's sit down and talk about it. So give them
that
some
makes
permission.
a huge difference. That makes a huge difference. It actually allows them to, first thing is they gain your trust that, okay, you understand, you know. I remember several years ago, something happened emotionally on the show, and I just said to my guest, who became a good friend as well, you make me feel understood. I had never said that to anybody ever. And the only thing that, like, I was in tears as I said that, you make me feel understood. And that's a huge thing for me, you know. And I think that's what's missing in workplaces, at homes. Something as small as furnishings, you know, the furniture, the office arrangements, how the setup is. I hate to say this, 99% is all ready and prepared for extroverts, not for introverts at all.
Snap. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And, you know, the advent of the open plan office was the beginning of the demise of the flow that introverts can get into with their work. Because I have a proposition, and I do want to explore this, but, you know, the Csikszentmihalyi concept of flow, my proposition is that introverts get into flow easier than extroverts, provided the environment is right, because we don't need that external stimulation. You know, we can lose ourselves in our work really easily. And I do want to explore that proposition because I think it would be a fascinating piece of research. But,
and
you
I
know,
think we need to take that seriously. We need to take that not as, you know, it needs to become the focus. It needs to become the center of the conversation. It's funny because we say dialogue and conversation, the last thing we want to do sometimes. Sue is saying, I cannot stand open offices. And, you know, Sue, you're not the only one, right? Right now, with remote work and everything, so many people are reluctant to go back. It's not just that they want to be with families and all that. It is a heaven for many.
Absolutely. And there are so many, you know, there are so many reasons why. Typically, if the environment, the home environment was suitable, introverts would have found themselves much more productive because there weren't the constant interruptions. There weren't the people shouting across and asking questions. There weren't phones ringing all over the place. There might be cats jumping on the desk, but, you know, we can deal with that. But, you know, we were much more productive. Then there's the whole commute time. And, you know, especially I live in the UK. I used to commute to London quite a lot. And the worst period for me was it would take 2 hours, 10 minutes each end of the day. So that's nearly 4.5 hours a day that I would spend shoulder to shoulder with people, struggling to find a seat. And it wasn't a productive part of my life. Now, during lockdown, when people realized all of a sudden with the technology we now have, we can work from home, most introverts went, yeah, I love it. Bring it on. Let me do this more. And typically it would be the extroverts that said, oh, I hated it. I felt so lonely. I got bored. There was no one to talk to. I couldn't focus, because the extroverts, remember, are being topped up all the while there's that busy, you know, noise going on around them. So the very thing that's charging them is draining us. So it's no wonder that most of us would prefer to carry on working from home.
Right. And, you know, just from that example, one thing I want to take away, and I'm going to take it away a little bit away from extroverts and introverts. When the pandemic happened, when everybody was forced to stop and pause, irrespective of whether you were introvert or an extrovert or ambivert or any other word, one thing happened. Everywhere around, on social media, in conversations, on phone calls, everybody was saying one thing: I got to reconnect with myself. I got to understand myself better. I have more clarity about my, you know, we talk about so much about, you know, quiet quitting and all that. People started quitting their jobs because there's so much noise by default in our culture. We don't even get to actually decide, who am I?
No.
In pandemic, as negative and as awful it was, it actually gave the opportunity to the world to go, do you know yourself?
Absolutely. And not only do you know yourself, but what do you want from life? What is it? And so many people I know reassessed their life, their priorities, their goals, their, you know, what they wanted for themselves and for their families, and have made big decisions on the back of that to actually change the way they work, change the importance that they place on it. And of course, when organizations are now trying to drag people back to the office, there are people now saying that doesn't make sense to me. And they would never have said that. You know, I've often said, can you imagine the pandemic 15, 20 years ago, before we had the technology now? It would have been almost disastrous for us. I think probably the best we had was what, Skype back then. I can't think of much else. Whereas now, you know, we have the technology to be able to work anywhere and be productive, operate within a global team, manage the different time zones, and get great work done from wherever. So why go
Why
back into
force it?
an
You
office?
know, and high tech mother is agreeing with you. She just said, I like socializing, but on my terms and limited. I like my room better. I relate to that. I absolutely understand what you mean. And then she says, especially when their roles do not require to be in office.
Yeah,
That's what's missing. Like, we're forcing everyone. What if,
yeah,
okay, I understand that you want people back in office. What if you gave them a choice?
yeah.
What you
And
let them decide, is that the right environment for you? Sorry,
yeah.
go on.
No, and a lot of people are choosing that kind of hybrid model. But then back to discrimination and bias, they're then judging those who are preferring not to go into the office as lazy or not committed to the organization or lacking ambition, not committed, you know, all these kind of labels that they're given, because actually they realize that, you know, if I work better on my own or in a quieter environment, somehow the organization is then judging me poorly for that. And I'm going to be discriminated against and my career prospects potentially damaged. So there are some people who are feeling they have to go back into the office, even though, and somebody gave me this example just this week. What she said to me is, we've been told we must go back into the office at least 3 days a week. Okay, so a bit of flexibility there.
Mhm.
But she said, I go into the office and I then spend most of the day on Zoom or Teams or something similar, working with other people in other offices. So I could
Exactly.
have done that from home. What was the point of going into the office to do that?
And I could have saved the commute. I could have saved the expenses. I could have done so much more, and be less tired, be less exhausted,
Yeah,
and probably work for longer. In this is what I find interesting, that we are forcing people to come back to work. Some of these people outperformed when they work from home. So if even if performance is the criteria,
yeah,
why not at least measure how did they perform during the pandemic? What did they do? How did they handle that? I think that's a really good, significant key to seeing. Oh, this person really works really well at home, and we don't need
yeah,
them here. Maybe once in a month, maybe even once a week. I understand that. Sometimes certain things
yeah.
you need that. I do want to make a little announcement here. Since 2012, my company is 100% remote. You're not
Fabulous.
required to come to work. It's entirely your choice. We've practically never had more than 10% people in the office. Never. And I say this, before the pandemic, people judged us for working from homes. Now they come to us to learn how to do that efficiently. So
Yeah.
that. Now I want to jump to something very important.
Okay.
People have seen this on the banner. People have, they're seeing that on your title. We're talking about a flourishing introvert you are, and this banner says flourishing introverts.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, can introverts flourish, and
Yeah.
what's that got to do with your brand?
So, it's a big question. I it was back in 2017, 2018 that I knew I wanted to pivot slightly what I was doing, because I'm still doing a lot of work, traditional kind of management, leadership, interpersonal skills work with organizations. But I finally got mad enough that wherever I worked in the world, what I noticed was the quieter ones being overlooked and undervalued. And it took me until I was nearly 60 to finally got mad enough about that, because, you know, I'd been somehow part of, I'd colluded unconsciously, really, I'd colluded with the extroversion bias, because, you know, I'd expected that of other people. I'd expected it of myself without recognizing it. And then I had this kind of, you know, wake up moment that actually the people who could self-promote, who could talk a good day, they wouldn't necessarily deliver the goods, but they'd talk a good day, were the ones who seemed to get promoted. And I finally got mad enough. So I wanted to establish this business that focused on enabling introverts to be the best version of themselves. And I was kind of umming and ahhing about what to call the business. And I woke up one morning and I had this word flourishing kind of just milling around me, in almost in front of my eyes and in my head. It was everywhere around me. And being the introverted researcher that I am, I then went and kind of, because I had a concept of what flourishing meant, of course I did, but I then went away and did a bit of kind of digging around what it meant. And I came across this amazing definition from Professor Lynn Sutz, or Dr. Lynn Sutz, actually, who's big into the positive psychology movement. And as soon as I read her definition, it's like, that's it. That's exactly what I want. So forgive me for a moment if I read this, because I want to get it spot on. And then almost I think what we need to do is unpack it, because it's such a powerful definition. What she says is that flourishing is the product of the pursuit and engagement of an authentic life. So this is an active process we're talking about here. So flourishing is not a destination, it's a journey. It's kind of where we're going. And that authentic life brings inner joy and happiness. Isn't that what most of us want anyway? And the way we do that is through meeting goals. So I have aspirations, I have goals, I have vision, because one of the myths is that we lack ambition. No, we don't. We just don't shout about it all the time. So through meeting goals, being connected with life passions, yes, and through relishing in accomplishments through the peaks and valleys of life. Now, that is a big definition, but boy, there's some power in that, because what it says is that, you know, what we're in pursuit of is this authentic life. We're not pretending. We're finding something that lights us up, in that we're finding something that, you know, is connected to our passions. So the whole westernized version of the Japanese thing, ikigai, is, you know, what is it you're good at? What is it you love doing? What does the world need, and what can you get paid for? At the heart of that is the westernized version of ikigai, and for me is kind of the flourishing. But what it acknowledges is that it's a roller coaster. You know, there are going to be ups and downs. And if I lose impetus or momentum or heart when things are down, rather than going, that's interesting, purposefully curious, one of my business principles, I wonder what's that about. And by the way, how can I get myself back up again? Then for me, that's what flourishing is about, recognizing that if I'm following my heart and my passions, doing things that matter to me, it's going to be a rocky journey sometimes, but there's learning and there's joy in all of it. Sorry, a very long answer to your question.
No, absolutely. I love that, because you are so spot on. That's exactly, you know, I shared with you and a few close friends the detachment journey I've been on. It is in part about introversion. It's in part about silencing everything. And it became so much that not only I needed to be introvert, but I needed to really detach. I needed to walk away from everything. I quit my job. I left my company for 7 months. I'm back at that company, but for 7 months, I said, no, I've had enough. I love what I set up and everything, but I've had enough. And the thing is, this conversation is very much needed, because same thing that I said before and what you said earlier, it makes me feel understood. And that
Yeah.
changes everything. That changes the confidence we have. That
Yeah.
changes how valuable I feel. I feel like I am part of something. I can contribute in a way that is valuable. I do want to share this. High Tech Mother just said, wow, great info right there. Inner joy on my introvert terms. I think she's talking about the lines that you read. And that's
Yeah.
it. It's about the inner joy. At the end of this, what do we want? Everybody at the end of the day wants to be happy, have joy, right? Pardon me. I do have to ask you. Earlier, you were talking about. I think it's a quiz you're talking about. Pardon me if I don't
Mm.
remember. Is it available on your website, flourishingintroverts.com?
It is, yeah. People can find it there, and it's just if people want the link, yourintroverttype.co.uk. Dead simple, but yeah, it's on the website.
Awesome. And we will post that information in the comments as well so people can access that. Well,
Yeah.
we are running out of time. This has been a great conversation, but we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
No, we
So
haven't.
in this live, I am already extending an invite to you that there's 2 more podcasts that I want you to come on and talk more about. As you were talking, you were giving me more and more and more topics. So I absolutely love that. And Blue Lotus Film says, hi, Szebastian and Joanna. I absolutely love her. And you're going to hate me, Sarah. For a second, I forgot your name because I just looked at Blue Lotus Film. So sorry, but I remember you. Okay, so don't kill me. But that's it. And she says, I'm excited to go back and watch. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And watch and share around. One thing that I do want to say is what you have talked about is things that are so basic, so
Yeah.
beginning of the conversation, because there's so much more to being introvert. There's so much more to be to our personality. And yes, it can sometimes be confusing because people might think, well, but you talk. You and I are talking right now. But you and I both know as soon as this finishes, we're going to be get out of here. Don't talk to me for next 3 days. We're done. You know, and that's what people need to understand. Now,
Yeah.
before we finish, I do like to bring a little bit fun part into this. So I have a couple of questions for you. If you're ready, it's a rapid
Okay.
fire round.
I'm
I'll
going
be
to
off
drink
camera.
I'm going to
You'll be
drink some
answering.
water.
Okay, I will grant you that. Okay, Joanna, what mistake have you made in your life that you want others to be aware of and not make?
The big one for me, and this is an easy answer actually, the big one for me is to not pretend to be something you're not. So I wished I hadn't spent those nearly 3 decades pretending to be more extroverted, because that's what I thought people wanted. So I wished I hadn't done that, and I hope other people don't do that.
It's exhausting. It kills you, it changes you, it damages you. So thank
Yeah.
you. I'm going to take that as my Bible, and I'm going to, follow that more and more. I try, but I need to do more.
Yeah.
Second question. If you could collaborate with anyone in this planet, dead or alive, or another galaxy, it's your choice. Who would it be? Why? And what would you collaborate on?
Oh gosh, what a big question. Now remember,
The question is
introverts
right in
have a
front of you if you need to read.
think, say, think communication process. So I'm going to
Uh-huh.
rapidly be thinking about it. Who would I want to collaborate with? I'd actually, and this might be a bit trite, but I'd want to collaborate with Richard Branson, because there was an article just recently where he talked about why introverts make great leaders. And he's somebody that I can relate to a lot. And so I'd love to collaborate with him.
And they do. We have, hey, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Richard Branson. There's so many names. Susan Cain. There are so many people.
Yeah.
And this is just off the top of my head. So I
Marissa
agree.
Meyer, yeah, all sorts.
There are some world-changing experts and leaders
Yeah.
that we do not give enough credit to.
Barack Obama.
All right. My final question for you. Absolutely. And look at him when he talks. He takes his time, but everything he has to say without getting political. I love the man. And what would you do with $2 billion if you had only 1 hour to spend, but not on you?
What would I do with $2 billion? I'd buy a few islands and set up retreats for introverts to go to recharge. So there would be individual cabins out to sea, and it would be free to introverts who need to recharge.
I love that. And guys, we said it here first. It's Joanna's copyright. You better not steal the idea. We are going to come after you. I absolutely love that. That would be such a relief, And Rebecca just agrees. This is what we need: a retreat for introverts. I love that. So I'm hoping for those $2 billion to find you, and that happens. It will be really great. Now, Joanna, in closing, what's the one message you have for introverts, extroverts, the world out there, in terms of dealing with introversion, or anything about introversion that you think that people should think about?
I think the message I'd like to leave people with is to really own your strengths, get to know yourself really well and own your strengths, not what other people think they are, but what you know they are, and find ways to articulate them positively. So when people would say to me, "You're so quiet," in the past, I would mumble an apology. Now I say, "Thank you for noticing." One of my great skills as an introvert is empathic listening, and I can only do that if I'm quiet. So thank you for noticing. So own those strengths and articulate them positively.
Well, the team is reminding me I can't make that the last message because there's something important. They reminded me that I need to ask you. You are right now running a special, I believe, masterclass, a course, something about bravery. If you don't mind giving us a couple of minutes to talk about that. And then I promise I'll let you go and recharge.
And funnily enough, just an hour or two ago, I was running the first drop-in surgery for the Becoming Braver participants. And it's one of the things that somebody in my group said, "I know what I need to do, but I just need to be braver." And it gave me the idea that what we need, and it's not so much a course as a series of sessions that are helping people in small ways build that bravery muscle. Because for me, it is a muscle that needs building. And a bit like, if we don't walk or don't exercise, don't go to the gym, our muscles atrophy. I think our bravery muscle does. The less brave we are, the smaller it gets and the less brave we feel. So these 3 sessions are really designed to help people take those small steps day by day in the direction of their bigger vision, in the direction of their purpose. And people are already talking about the things that they've started to think about and started to do as a result of it. So I know we're onto something good here. It's the first time I've run it, and actually I can see it being something that runs quite frequently. So becoming braver, something that many of us need to do.
I absolutely love it. And guys, we will post the information so you can check it out. Just want to clarify for people who might be interested, will you be running this again if they, because obviously they've missed the first part. So will you be running this again?
Yes, so the information page has now been changed to a wait list. So if people are interested, they can, and I'll give you the link, they can check out and add themselves to the wait list.
Well, sorry, I should have said no pressure. Okay, I do want to close with some beautiful messages that have come. High Tech Mother just said, "I needed this conversation." And as you just saw before, Sarah said, "I'm excited to go back and watch." And Rebecca Bradsby says, "This is what she needed." And High Tech Mother also says, "I'm emotional, crying. Thank you, Joe." Well, I don't know if she wants you to call her Joe, but there you go.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
I think somebody in the team messaged this as well. What a beautiful episode, Dreamaniac team. So thank you, team, whomsoever you are. We'll talk later. But thank you so much, Joanna. This has been awesome. I think as exhausted as we'll be after this, the 1 hour very well spent. And again, we haven't even scratched the surface. There's so much more we need to do. And something exciting is coming, guys. But I can't tell you that. Not yet. So we will see you soon. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. So I will end this in a second. Us and watch the replay back on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I think it is available on other places as well, Tribal and Spoutable and all that. But don't quote me on that. The team can check. So you can go to our website, Dreamaniac.tv.Szebastian.com, and find all the information. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great one. Take care, guys.